All right, so how much time do I have for this?
Yes. Welcome to the Stephen meeting, and special thanks to Mike Pomfret from the facility here for graciously hosting us. And he's staying later than they normally are here, so we'll make sure that we wrap up by 8:30. Quiet in the back. We'll make sure that we wrap up by 8:30 and maybe get out of here a little earlier so that he can go home. With our final presentation will be Greg and Scott on the 23 window bus, and so then for those who are on the tour and such, we can go outside just at the end of the meeting and finish up the meeting out there looking at that bus. But without further ado, also since Mike has some other things to do, we'll just start the meeting right off with his presentation so that then he can go do some of the other stuff while we continue with our meeting. Thank you very much, Mike.
Thank you. Thanks for coming out to Test Beds. Happy to host your group. So my name is Mike. I'm the managing director of the Washington Clean Energy Test Bed, which is the facility that you're in. We're part of the Clean Energy Institute here at the University of Washington. And the title of my slides is basically the mission of the facility, which is to accelerate the path from research, so stuff that happens in a lab, to industry innovation, something that's commercially relevant, right? So we need to get things out to market faster if we're going to try to solve the climate issue. A bit about me: I have a PhD in chemistry from the University of Maryland. I spent my PhD work developing fuel cell technologies, so hydrogen power. Parlayed that into a job at the Naval Research Lab over in DC, where I spent time developing all sorts of fuel cells and other catalytic materials, and started to get into lithium-ion batteries. And then my wife got a dream job offer out here, and that all went to shit. And I came out here and started over. And that's where I really learned the business side of science. I tried my hand as a CTO of a startup company, taking that sort of catalytic material chemistry background and looking at activated indoor air treatment. And then I also helped run a small material analysis company over in Ballard. Neither of those were really energy related, so it didn't really hold my interest, and I started networking around Seattle Clean Tech Alliance, the Washington State Department of Commerce. Eventually met the director of the Clean Energy Institute, Dan Schwartz, through that networking. He started telling me about the Clean Energy Institute, and he said, hey, we just got a bunch of money from the state. We're going to do something really cool. I'm not sure what it's going to be yet because we just got the money, but if you're interested, I'll keep you posted. Spoiler alert, that's a test beds. And so I stayed in contact with him as the idea was being developed, and then when the opportunity came to work here, I applied and was fortunate enough to land the gig. So this is the mission statement of the Clean Energy Institute. It's accelerating the adoption of a scalable and equitable clean energy future, which is that line right there is like the stuff of Donald Trump's nightmares. And then by advancing next generation solar energy and battery materials and devices, as well as their integration with systems in the grid. So for those who went on the tour, you saw how we deal with materials and devices. We didn't really talk too much about the grid, so I'll cover that there. But those are historic research strengths here at the university that the facility is addressing. And so on the academic side, we really try to train students to think from quantum, or like angstroms and nanometers, all the way out to kilometers, because it's a continuum, right? So what you do here when you're developing new materials is eventually going to affect how the grid functions. And for people who are electrical engineers and thinking about the future grid, they need to be able to accommodate these new materials as they come online. So when we train students, we're not just working with chemistry students or material scientists. We're working with mechanical engineers who are thinking about new manufacturing processes. We're working with civil engineers who are thinking about how this stuff is going to be deployed. Electrical engineers who are thinking about grid operation. And in fact, we run a lab class that's cross-listed against across a whole bunch of those departments to try to get students to really understand how this works. And so we have chemists that are thinking about the grid, and we have electrical engineers that are thinking about nanoparticle synthesis. So, the institute itself is very academic. Beyond just training students here, we have postdoctoral fellowships. We support faculty hires if they're going to be doing research in this area, K through 12 outreach. We work with disadvantaged communities, rural communities that don't have access to resources, and try to get them into a cleaner energy future. Right around the time that the testbed started, the U.S. Department of Energy released the results of a study. It was actually part of a call for proposals where it's small print, so I'll walk you through it, but you see this asterisk here. It applies to this statement here. So basically what they did is they reached out to energy hardware innovators and said, what are your pain points? And the asterisk is, please don't say money. We know money is a problem for everybody. And capital was still the number 2 answer. And they left it in, which is helpful because it helps me tell my story. But it's also a certain type of money, right? We're not talking about being able to pay salaries or rent. We're talking about being able to buy equipment and build a factory. Like, these are problems that are more concerning for hardware developers than they are for software developers. So when I was doing that networking I was talking about earlier, I met with the CTO of a supercapacitor company in the area, and he jokingly said, if you want a software company, order some pizzas, invite some friends over on a Friday night, and by Sunday night you might actually have a company. And that doesn't work that way with hardware, right? The average time that it takes for something to get from lab to market, if it's successful, is like 20 years. And that's a whole different ballgame for things like people like investors and researchers. Think about PhDs lasting about 5 years. That's 4 generations of PhDs, to put that in perspective, right? So it's intensive. Other things that were considered collaboration. You have academics who are inventing new things, but oftentimes what happens in academia is a new thing is invented, you get an awesome publication, maybe a patent, and then the professor is like, okay, how can we turn this into the next grant? They're not thinking about how does this become a societal benefit, right? It's next grant. Then you have the startup companies, entrepreneurs, innovators who are willing to take the risk to try to commercialize something, but they tend to not have a lot of money. So it's hard for them to do that. They're constantly looking for money. In some cases, looking for money overtakes technology development for them. And then you have the big corporates who have the money in lots of cases, especially when it comes to energy. They're the end users, and they're willing to buy things, and they have specific needs. So if we get the people with the needs and the problems talking to the people who are doing the inventing and the commercializing, we have a better continuum from lab to market, right? And then testing and validation. For those who are on the tour, you saw some flexible solar panels. Are we going to certify that those work the right way, the same way that we do with silicon? Probably not. There's going to be different verification or certifying tests that are going to need to be done. And then fabrication, design, and knowledge. I'm a PhD in chemistry, right? I'm a nerd, and a lot of people that develop these technologies are nerds, and they're really good in the lab, but they might not be great at marketing something or designing a commercial package for something that looks attractive and potentially be bought. And manufacturing something is different than making something in the lab. And then business mentorship. So again, especially here at the university, we have scientists and engineers working on new technologies. Oftentimes we'll see a startup company, if they're spinning out of the university, again, especially, where the CEO is an engineer or a scientist, and that might not be the best fit for the CEO role. Those people are wickedly smart, and if they're a Renaissance person, maybe they can do it. But oftentimes you need to get that experienced entrepreneur, experienced business person in the fold to be able to get out to market. So what does all this have to do with the University of Washington? Governor Inslee, shown here, if you recall, clean energy and climate were big issues for him, really wanted it to be his legacy. He founded the Clean Energy Institute with a line item in the budget back in 2013. And then in 2015, with rapid growth of the Institute, provided more money, $8 million, in fact, to start the test beds. So our capital outlay comes from the state. But why do it here? Regional corporate innovation, right? So we have big companies, Microsoft, we have Boeing, Amazon, Meta and Google are in the area. We have a maritime industry, aerospace industry. We have PACCAR, the second largest truck producer in the world, up the street, right? So you might not think of these organizations as energy companies, but they all have massive energy concerns, and a few of them, many of them, have pledged to try to clean up their carbon act, right? So big corporate dollars. Local startup ecosystem, Seattle ranks 5th in the nation in startup activity. You know, we're not the Bay Area or Boston, right? But we're not too far behind. And with connections to the Bay Area provided by some of those local corporates, we have a pretty robust and growing entrepreneur community here. And then where we come in is advanced capabilities, right? So when you're building hardware, you need tools that you can put into a manufacturing line, and they're expensive. You know, if you saw downstairs, a lot of the tools that you were looking at are hundreds of thousands of dollars, in some cases millions of dollars, and that is too big of a bill for a startup company. They just can't buy that amount of money if they're fortunate. Spend that amount of money to buy that equipment. And if they're fortunate enough to have the money to spend, they better make sure it's exactly what they need, because even if they miss a couple different bells and whistles, they might not be able to use that to build whatever the product is, and then they end up with a really expensive doorstop that doesn't help them at all and probably sinks their company, right? So being able to access tools at an hourly rate, you could spend a few $1,000s, maybe a few tens of thousands of dollars to work out your process engineering and de-risk the capital outlay when it does come time to do that. And then non-technical partnerships and pathways to market are sort of how we build our community. You know, as far as the university is concerned, we're a cost center. We survive by people coming in and paying money to use our tools. That covers our operations costs, and as long as we're doing that, I never have to talk to the dean. But we know if we're just doing that, we're probably not going to be successful. We need to help foster the ecosystem, and that's where this comes in. And then lastly, here in the state of Washington, we're not allowed to subsidize private industry. So they have to pay the full cost of using the tools. They take on the full financial burden of using the lab, of working with our staff. And here in Washington, that means there's no IP with the university, no IP entanglement with the university. So anything that's developed here by companies who are paying their bills, it stays with the company, which makes us a very industry-friendly place to work. So quickly, we have 3 test beds. The research train test bed, small scale, think fingernail size, right? So, a place where you might synthesize a new photonic nanoparticle or a new battery material for the first time, and then put it into something like a coin cell or a square centimeter solar cell and see how it performs. Good for students to learn what they need to have careers in the industry, but not really industry relevant, right? It's just too small. So that's where this facility comes in. Scale up and characterization. We have that lab scale equipment so we can reproduce what was done elsewhere, make sure it's real in a new environment. A prototyping scale, so think about a square foot. So this is a solar mini module, and it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 cells in a mini module, right? So not just a single cell that's the size of a thumbnail anymore. Something that's really going to hold up. Someone's going to believe, like, oh yeah, that looks kind of like a solar cell. And then manufacturer scale, where we can start producing this at pilot commercial scale. And then on the systems integration side, this is where we deal with grid. So this is a supercomputer, and we can process grid information in real time with microsecond time resolution. So if you think about how fast electrons move around, we need to be able to sample that data very quickly. So if you're looking at a grid simulation and you initiate a fault in one part of the grid and you want to see how that propagates, like, you need that microsecond time scale to do it. And then we can use the University of Washington as a test bed. Virtually, facilities would never let us plug in anywhere, but we could take data from PV installations on campus or smart meter data and sort of right scope these simulations to like a single building, the hospital complex, the campus as a whole, what have you. We look at residential, commercial, and so on. And then we could do hardware in a loop as well. So not just simulating, but we could plug in hardware up to 30 kilowatts. So we can't really do grid scale. We just don't have the tie-in to Seattle City Light to support anything much bigger than what we have now. The reason we settle on 30 kilowatts, this group might know, it's about the size of a Tesla pack, right? So So it's not a big number, but it's a relevant number. And we've done things like look at grid controls and smart power electronics to allow virtual power plants, right? So if you think of the grid as a circle that was designed over 100 years ago with power plants in the middle of the circle sending electricity out to their customers, and what the industry calls the grid edge, right, the edge of the circle. But now we have distributed energy resources like cars. If we ever figure out like vehicle to grid technologies or solar or on-site storage, we have the potential to send power back in, and the infrastructure is just not there to handle it, right? So if we can figure out the right power electronics and software controls, virtual power plants are basically, you could take a community microgrid or maybe something even the size of the college campus, and if you have the right infrastructure there, you can make that look to the rest of the world like it's a power plant, right? So we've been open since 2017, so just over 8 years. In that time, we've had over 900 people register to use the lab, about 150 companies, about 20 educational institutions, and always growing. So those numbers are probably higher right now. They come from around the world. I think we work with companies from 35 different US states and about 20 or so different countries. And then about 70% of the companies we work with are startups or small businesses. So that really gets back to the de-risking of capital outlay, right? We're vital for these companies if they're going to get off the ground. But you can see it's not just startups. Most of what we do is under NDA, so the logos you see here are all companies that have publicly acknowledged working with us. Can't really talk about specifics of what anybody does, but just know that on this slide we have grid controls, battery electrolytes, battery separator membranes, battery electrode materials, data analytics, battery management systems, solar materials, advanced manufacturing, some nuclear, and some water treatment. We don't do anything radioactive, but we can help them out with other materials, and so on. You heard me mention water there at the end. We're an additive manufacturing line, or additive manufacturing facility, which we built to serve batteries and solar, but we can use additive manufacturing for a number of different things. So here are all the mission-aligned things that we knew we'd be working on, but beyond batteries, solar, and grid, we've also supported biosensors, medical devices, personal health products. On the IT side, RF microchips, VR gaming displays, and so on. I mentioned water treatment, sustainable food, carbon capture, all kinds of stuff that I never would have thought when I hired that I would be working on vaccines. But it turns out there's a whole bunch of material analysis needs for people who are developing vaccines. As the technical side, in terms of supporting the ecosystem, we have an entrepreneur in residence. It's funded in part by private donations, so it is a public resource. You don't have to pay for it. It's a consulting service that you can take advantage of. Babu Jain is a Silicon Valley guy. He is a serial entrepreneur, currently founder and CEO of Navia Energy. He's up here about once a month. In fact, he'll be here tomorrow for an event tomorrow afternoon. But he gives advice on team building, so making sure you have the scientists and science roles and the business roles. Market research, right? Just because we spent 5 years doing something and winning awards and publishing papers doesn't mean anyone's going to buy it. So, making sure that it's worth starting a company over, and if you do start a company, who you're selling it to, whose problem you're solving, that sort of thing. Partnerships, again, startups are not going to be the people that manufacture it, so does it make sense to partner with somebody who's going to manufacture the material, or a toll manufacturer? Strategic partnerships. We have a great example here locally of Group 14. It's a battery materials company. They couldn't get investment the traditional way. They didn't have investors buying in. So they went out and talked to people who they thought would be interested in either selling them material or buying material from them, and they ended up raising over $600 million through people like Sumitomo Chemical and Porsche and Microsoft and so on. And then fundraising, and this is not a comment on Babu in any way, but oftentimes entrepreneurs have a very specific view of fundraising, and it's what they went through. So we also have an investor in residence. So Jeff Keenan is a board member of Virtue Lab and a member of E8 Angels, which is a climate mission-driven angel investment group here in Seattle. Provides advice on investing. So everything from fundraising, so bootstrapping, friends and family phases, to government grants, which are a great way to vet what you're doing. And, if you're getting government grants, it means your technology has been looked at by a panel of experts and they believe it and they're willing to fund it, and then that means something to investors. Looking at the value of the product, how to manage intellectual property, especially key for people spinning out of a university where there's already entanglement. And then investor pitches. One of the hardest things I had to learn to do when I was moving sort of out of the lab and more to the business side is how do you talk to normal people about hardcore scientific concepts. I was trained as a chemist. I was going to scientific conferences and talking to professors, and it was like a totally different language, right? If you're talking to somebody who's not from that background. And investors often are not from that background, but they have the money you need, so you need to talk to them in a certain way. And then and then how do you develop that pitch to convey that information? We have partners from really around the country. Department of Commerce, given our role supporting startup companies, and then Clean Tech Alliance. It's the nation's largest clean tech business support organization. They happen to be headquartered here. Virtue Lab, which originated as Oregon Best and is now more of a regional organization, also supporting climate innovators. The Cascadia Clean Tech Accelerator, jointly operated by those two organizations. Just one example of accelerators and incubators that we work with to try to find new startups that we can help. They tend to be stealthy. You have to wait for them to pop their heads up, and oftentimes those are the programs where they do it. DOE National Labs, we work with NREL in Colorado on solar and grid stuff. Pacific Northwest National Labs here on battery and grid, and then Sandia in New Mexico on those verification things, right? When I mentioned solar, we actually have a program with Sandia where we look at bankability studies for new solar technologies and how they're going to be valued and verified. American Made Network from the Department of Energy. We've been part of that network since the first American Made Solar Prize back in 2017, 2018. NextFlex is a flexible printed electronics, or flexible electronics. We do the printing. They have a battery arm, and then U.S. Manufacturing of Advanced Perovskites, that's a solar material, which we co-founded this with UNC Chapel Hill, University of Toledo, and NREL, and then we pulled in pretty much every startup that's working on printed solar, or at least the perovskite materials, and then all the way up to folks like Dow, right, to try to boost the manufacturing of this new solar material, because we're kind of all conceding the fact that we lost out to China on silicon. And then E8 Angels, I already mentioned them when I was talking about Jeff. Prime Coalition out of Boston, they use philanthropic money to fund innovation in hardware, right? You don't have to wait for, you don't have like anxious investors waiting for a return. It was philanthropic, donated, so they're okay waiting 20 years. And then Washington Research Foundation here locally, which does a couple different functions. One, they provide grants. They try to keep technologies incubating in a university as long as possible so that it's more mature when it does come time to spin it out, has a better chance of success. And then at that point, they do consider investing in the private sector as well. So that is kind of the high level, quick and dirty. Thanks for coming. Again, I'm Mike. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me here. Check out our website, and then we also post on LinkedIn periodically about events. We'll post highlights of companies we worked with, as well as some features on the types of equipment that we have here. So, yeah.
As part of your relationships, do you guys have a relationship with the Net Zero Climate?
Unofficially, yes. We're working on something more official now. Yeah. So, yeah. Excellent. So, do you need the projector?
We will need the projector, yes. Scott, I believe, are you going to use your own laptop?
No, I have to use these.
Okay, USB then. Maybe, I saw Jay, would you mind getting the SIVA laptop set up while I commence with the meeting?
A little faster.
There's a whole other world, there's a whole other world.
All right. Well, thanks a lot, Mike. Again, really appreciate you letting us see this place. Sounds like a pretty neat opportunity. And for those who went on the tour earlier or didn't go on the tour, it's pretty impressive. Thin film printers printing solar panels on like really thin sheets and stuff. Lots of cool stuff. full battery lab for testing. I did have a question about that. Do you know the maximum volts and amps for the battery test lab is capable of?
So per channel, our max is 60 volts, 50 amps. No, 60 volts, 60 amps.
Okay. And then I saw one device that said like 4000 A, and I was thinking, is that 4000 amps? But no, probably not.
No,
Okay.
no, that might just be a model number. Yeah.
All right. Cool. Thanks a lot.
You changed my password.
Oh, let's see. So usually we start off the meeting then if there's any new folks, and I do see a few new faces, or if you haven't been to this SEVA meeting in a while, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself and tell us how you heard about SEVA and if you drive an EV or not yet, and if so, what is the EV? We can start with you folks in the back.
We have a Rivian and a old Model S. And we just learned about you guys online. I've been to a meeting back when you guys like 6 months
You wanna-
ago. Over in the Rivian location. But I would like to just I have a video about it.
Cool.
I've been working in clean energy for about
Wow. Working in clean energy for over a decade, and then they have a Rivian and also an older Model S. Have you had any other electric vehicles before those?
when we put our names in for the Rivian, so what we need to dip our toes in the water. So we got ourselves a strict sounding and the research is pretty good.
Cool. And are you an all EV family then now?
Absolutely.
Awesome. Very cool. Anybody else here who hasn't been here for a while or here for the first time? Yes, sir.
I've been to one SEVA meeting before, also at the Rivian one.
And I have radio thing.
My name's Kelson. I know Brian. I drive a Plymouth hybrid.
All right, halfway there.
Yeah.
The gateway drug.
Yeah. EV's next, someday.
Cool. All right, well, we have some news then from last time. Unfortunately, a little bit of sad news. Steve Huff passed away, electric vehicle racing pioneer, and Grace sent some information on that out to the list. If you don't know Steve Huff, he had been diagnosed with cancer and he fought it for at least 4 years, so he put up a good fight. And during that time set the record for a four-wheeled electric vehicle in the quarter mile, going faster than 200 miles per hour in the quarter mile. And he was local in Burien, and so he'll be missed, but he pioneered stuff, and a number of SEVA members, Charlie and Ron and myself and Pat, some other local folks, we helped build the initial dragster, which was called the Current Technology Dragster that he wound up racing. And it took a long time, and if you know the history of drag racing at all, Don Garlitz was the first human to go faster than 200 miles per hour in the quarter mile with any type of dragster that was a fuel. And, so that really, and now there's 300 mile per hour top fuel dragsters and stuff. So, but that 200 miles per hour, I mean, when you start getting so quick in the quarter mile, literally the drivers have to worry about things like their retinas detaching from the acceleration. Like it gets really insane. And there had been an electric motorcycle that went faster than 200 miles per hour, just barely a while back, but no four-wheeled electric vehicle had ever done that. And so Don Garlitz, who was in his 80s, was working on an electric race car to do that, and had some attempts, and they were not successful. And he said, well, it can't be done with the current technology. And so then Steve Huff made his dragster and named it Current Technology. So that's kind of a play on the amperage and also off of that. So it was pretty neat that he wound up doing that. His first project used also some locally produced motors from Cascadia Motion Systems down in Oregon, and Reinhardt Motion Systems, now all Cascadia, for the motor controllers and the motors. And then he actually wound up going with even more motor controllers and I believe YASA motors in the final iteration, so some smaller super high power axial flux motors. But anyway, a little bit of sad news, and he'll be missed. And I'll let you know on the SEVA list though, his brother reached out, and they might be going to sell some of the parts, and there's also leftover chargers and other things from it. So we'll let you know if I hear anything about that. Otherwise, hopefully it may go to a museum or something. Anybody here know anybody well over in Eastern Washington, or have any folks, especially in Yakima? Because another news item, my father is the president of the Yakima Valley Trolleys Association, and if you ever are over in Yakima, this trolley railway is unique in the whole country in that it is the last intact interurban, fully electric interurban railway. So maybe many of you have heard way back in the 20th century, Firestone Tire Corporation and Chevron, then Standard Oil, and General Motors got together and decided, because originally as the cities were growing, there were horse and buggies and stuff, and then cars came along, but they were kind of claptrap. But you had steam locomotives, and then you had electric trolleys and streetcars in almost every city. And Standard Oil and Firestone and General Motors got together and decided, let's see, we make tires, trolleys don't use those. We make oil, electric trolleys don't use those. And we make vehicles like buses, and so how about we get together? And so they basically sold buses to cities at a losing proposition of cost to make an offer the city couldn't refuse to get them to do away with their trolley railroads. And then that's why we have so many more buses today. So, there's some holdouts, like San Francisco still has their old cable cars, that's neat. But lots of cities were connected by trolleys back in the day. And Yakima is the last intact, continuously operational interurban railway, which means that it goes from one city to another. And over the years, the line has gotten less and less as it has been closed. But if you ever get a chance when you're over there to visit the car barns, they have a 1450 outlet and some EV charging stations you can charge at. And the power substation it's a museum. They're a 501c3 nonprofit, and there's Frankenstein switches. Like, what's amazing is everything is just kept the way that it was, and so it's very unique. Anyway, the sad news is there's a paving operation going along on 6th Avenue, which is the main place that their tracks run, and the city is considering, after all these years, just paving over the tracks, which would make it now. And some of their electric locomotives, which are still running to this day, are over 100 years old. I believe their oldest is from 1907, and it still runs today. And these trolleys are all very old, and they're a testament to the longevity and reliableness of electric motors. And it all runs on 600 volts DC. Anyway, it's really sad, and I'll send out a message to the email list where you can provide some public comment, but it would be more impactful if you know anybody in Eastern Washington, specifically in Yakima, because it's the city council of Yakima, and that is going to be voting on this, and they'll be voting on it next Tuesday, the 17th. And hopefully they'll vote to include the trolleys. There are plans that include the trolley tracks, but there are also plans, because it is cheaper, to just simply pave over it. And then that would cut it off from Sela, the neighboring city that the lines go to. Sela Council has been leaning on it, like, we don't want the trolleys to go away, but it's up to Yakima. So that's another news item. Car shows from last month to this month. Did anybody go to any EV car shows? Want to give a quick report on? Nope. All right. Well, we've got the biggest ones coming up. There were a lot in April, of course, for the National Drive Electric Day that we talked about last month. But coming up, we have the Greenwood Car Show on June 28th. And Charlie, would you give a few details? If you have not yet sent your information, send it to c4tsai@yahoo.com, which is Charlie's email address. And take it away, Charlie. Tell us.
Yeah, thanks. So SEVA, as in past years, we've been basically paying the registration fees for EVs to bring cars as part of the SEVA club. In past years, I think we've had, typically a couple dozen cars at the show or more. This year, so far, I've got 13 cars signed up. Surprising to me is most of them are conversions.
Yeah.
There's only a couple of Cybertrucks and I think it's a Silverado. I forget, but most of the others are converted cars. So which will be interesting. It's always nice to have novelty cars at the show. But I think in past years it's been nice to also have a mix of production cars. So people, the public can talk to owners and get firsthand feedback and tips on the pros and cons of the various models of cars. So I'd like to see more people sign up to bring some of the production models as well as the conversions. Steve?
Do you have an application?
Well, I on the SEVA email, I sent out a couple of messages providing. All you need to do is email me, provide me your name, contact information, the year, make, and model of your car, and I'll take care of the registration with the Greenwood
Yes, I
Car
passed
Show.
that on to several people that I've talked to already.
Mhm.
Get a hold of you, your email address, and do that. So let's hope it.
Yeah.
Let's hope it flowers a little bit more. We want
Yeah.
at least 25 or 30.
That would be awesome.
I think most years we're actually the largest car club at the Greenwood Car Show.
Absolutely.
So, yeah, it'd be nice to keep that tradition going.
If you haven't been to the Greenwood Car Show, it's literally tens of thousands of people that cram that avenue all day long from about 8 to 4 p.m. And it's lots of classic cars and lots of people. So it's a great outreach opportunity to show off our unique electric vehicles and tell people about it. Ryan, do we have any confirmation from John Wayland whether he'll be
Yeah,
coming?
they
Fantastic. So, and you're gonna go pick them up with the Cybertruck?
Yep.
Awesome. So we'll be towing up the famous white zombie electric dragster from owned by John Wayland of Portland, Oregon, all the way.
He's starting off as inside conversion.
he'll be
And
bringing the
Insight
EV2.
EV2, awesome. So, sweet. Then next we have our featured presentation of the month, which will be Scott Van de Voort and EV Works. And Scott, you can come up and we'll get your USB plugged in.
You got it up. Awesome. Hi, so I'm Scott Van de Voort with EV Works, and our founder Greg is here with me as well. And I just want to say thank you to the Clean Energy Institute for having us here, and it's really nice having the chairs and having an indoor place to meet. So EV Works, who are we? We're mainly passionate innovators, and we come up with custom solutions for EV conversions and other things in the EV industry. So some of the main thing is integration development. So like we can do Nissan Leaf battery upgrades. So like a 40 or 62 kilowatt hour battery into an old 24 kilowatt hour Leaf with only like 30 miles of range. And we can do a lot of repairs instead of replacements. So there's common problems with chargers. We can go and replace the 30-cent diode, and upcycling the charger is really good. So we've also developed quite a few solutions for EV conversions that we do in-house. So one of them is we have the NACS or Tesla charge port, and we've designed custom circuit boards and controllers that make the latch work and the lights and everything. So we're working on the DC part. It's just AC right now. So this is the bus that most of you probably saw outside that we recently converted for the customer. I think we delivered it about 8 months ago or so. So pretty much all the interior looks the same. We've just got the forward, reverse, neutral selector and then an emergency stop button there as well. The key turns it on just like it used to. And this is the back. So all of the batteries and most of the EV conversion portion of the project is housed in the original engine bay. The battery box, some of you may recognize it's from EV West, but we didn't want to just hang it from the top, so we engineered all of this bracing underneath to support it near where the original motor mounted to. Then this is just an overview of the controls. And then the specs. So it's got a 37.8 kilowatt hour battery pack. It's good for about 75 miles. This bus does have the portal axles in the back, so it's an additional gear reduction at the right by the wheels. And if it didn't have those, it would probably be about a 100-mile range compared to some of the other vehicles we've done. Charges in level 1 and 2 with NACS, and it's got the motor's good for about 110 horsepower, but we have it tuned down to 50, and it's still way more than this bus really needs. So just go easy on the transmission. So when we start an EV conversion, we start with 3D scanning it to get a good overview of what kind of space we're going to have and where we can place all the components. So we've got the motor hooked up to the transmission, we've got the motor controller, battery box, we've got like a disconnect for when you do service on the vehicle, disconnects high voltage. We've got the charger and DC-DC converter packaged in here. And this is it without the 3D scan. And then this is the factor of safety animation, and it's pretty boring because it's blue, which means that it doesn't even dip into like a level 5 factor of safety, which would be green. So as many of you probably know, with engineering, a lot of engineering is what's the least amount of materials and lightest weight that you can factor into your designs. Well, if we just do quadruple, then you don't have to worry about spending hours and hours and hours trying to find the absolute perfect part, and this part only weighs a few pounds, so it's a little bit more fun to look at the stress animation. Here's some internals of the battery box. So all of the high voltage contactors, fuses, BMS, all is inside the high voltage battery. So the only thing that comes out of the battery pack are the high voltage wires going to the motor controller and to the charger and DC-DC converter. So all the cell tab, all the little tiny wires can't have any chafing happen to them and short out. All that's internal to the battery pack. And then on the left here, this is it nearly complete. And there's a contactor here for, I believe, the negative, and then the positive one is up there. So when the vehicle's off, no high voltage is coming out of any of the connectors, like the main motor connector there. And Steven would be excited because it's a mid-pack fuse.
Nice.
And here's the motor with the motor transmission adapter and a clutch. And then this is our wiring harness production. So we start with roping out the entire harness so we can build it on the bench. It's a lot easier and faster to not be crammed upside down in an engine bay building the wiring harness. So we start with rope. We have all of our connectors labeled and links to length, and then we grab wire, string it along, and then we use DR25 heat shrink to seal up the harness. And you can see at the top right, we've got like 50 different striped colors of wire. So every wire is a different color, so there's no confusion when we're building it and testing it. And it makes it a whole lot easier when there are issues, because there pretty much always is one or two things that we gotta go and check. That's just a poster up of the harness in progress, and then on the connectors, we'll do service loops so that as the connector flexes, it doesn't pull a pin out. And it also allows us to later, there's actually room to pull a pin out and move it to a different position if we did mess it up, and we'll find that in our checks before we put it in the vehicle. And then it will get strain relief with Kapton tape, and then there are boots that go on the connectors, so it makes a real solid connection, and you can pull on the harness all you want, it won't pull on a wire. And then this is the cooling work in progress. So we've got a radiator and a fan mounted near the air intake, so it works out really well. And then reservoir and a pump, and the cooling is mainly for the motor controller. It doesn't need cooling, but if you're going up long hills, having a water cool definitely helps. This is the charger and DC-DC converter combo unit, and we designed and welded up a quick little sheet metal mount to mount to the bus. On the right, you can see where it's tucked away. And that's the motor and motor controller and battery box all installed when we're doing our first spin up.
Of course.
And then we've got the brake lights that come on with regen, so won't have the, the Ioniq 5 that was having that issue.
What's the max regen power?
I don't know off the top of my head. We don't want to do too much with the original transmission, but we're probably only doing about 5 to 10 kilowatts.
Because it's
So
still
we have it turned down.
shiftable gears.
Yeah, it does.
Yeah, so something a lot of people don't consider, since most of the factory-built electric vehicles are just direct drive or have a single speed, the regen can just be set at basically a steady level, or sometimes they'll have 2 tiers where when you can push on the brake, it comes on a little bit higher, or as you let off the accelerator, it comes in more. But when you have a transmission with multiple gears, then with most conversions, there's not a way to tell the controller, oh, I'm in a different gear, and give a bunch of different regen settings for each gear. So what happens then is the controller, you just give it a particular level of maximum regen, and then since you're changing the final drive ratio, then that changes the strength feeling of the regen. So if you're in first gear, it's like, and if you're in 5th or 6th gear, then you will barely feel it, and so you got to choose a happy medium ground.
Yep. So we have regen both with the accelerator. As you lift off, you get some regen. Then as you push on the brakes, we have a brake pressure sensor that multiplies your braking power with regen. So it really gives the non-powered brakes this vehicle has, it feels like it has power brakes because of that. Yes?
How does that work with downshifting? Do you disable regen as you downshift?
There's a clutch sensor, so when the clutch is pressed in, it goes to, I can't remember the exact number, like 1 or 2% regen, which is similar to a engine
So it'll actually
braking.
slow down the
Yeah.
drivetrain as you're downshiftting?
So it helps you shift, yeah.
Yeah.
So this is the North American Charging Standard port, or Tesla, or NACS, however you prefer, installed in here. So for this project, what we did is we developed, I'll show on the next page actually. So not sure if you can really see, but this is the port, and then that's the cover on the right-hand side. And then that's with the cover removed. It just magnetically attaches on there, so there's easy access. So what we did is, this is actually from a Tesla Model 3. So now there's a O-ring fit in here. So this is what is in a Tesla Model 3. Tesla came out with their NACS article that had a picture of this, and then everyone on the forums was like, oh, when are they ever going to release this? And it was like this all along, actually, which is pretty neat. So what we did is, but the housing this is in is about this big. So we developed the smallest possible housing unit that holds, with a like 30% compression on the O-ring, waterproof fit, along with the latch. So the latch goes in here as well, and the Tesla latch actuator and everything. And then this can fit inside a fuel door in a EV conversion. So this part remains the same for all of our conversions, and then we just use different bracketry to connect to the exact vehicle. So all it is just a simple, it's like $20 with Send Cut Send to have a made in USA sheet metal bent part for the mount.
And how many amps is it good for?
As much as the Tesla unit is good for. So I don't know off the top of my head. Is it 500 or something, I think?
I don't know. I mean, as far as if it's literally, I guess, from the Model 3.
Yeah, this is literally a Model 3 part we get brand new from Tesla.
Okay, cool. So yeah, for sure, for anyone doing level 2, then 80 amps, no problem.
Yeah, and we're working on level 3 development as well with superchargers and multiple units. EVgo has NACS that we should be pretty easy to do. And then our prior NACS job that we did, we used a Tesla light ring. So when you open up the fuel door, it turns white, just like a Tesla would. When you plug it in, it turns blue, as that's the signal that the connector is latched. And then when it's charging, you get the breathing green. And then when it's fully charged, you get the solid green. And then when you go to press the button on it, now this is why the latch is really important. Especially for an EV conversion, is if you have no latch, you could just pull this out immediately and the charging doesn't stop. And that's a problem because you'll either get arcing here or your EVSE will probably open its relays before this gets pulled out, but then you'll get arcing likely in the relays or contactors inside the EVSE. So what our system does with our charge port controller is it looks at the current, the vehicle, the charging current, and it leaves the charge port latched until the current goes to 0. And then it opens the latch and it goes white to signal to you that the latch is open. And you can also hear it too. And then and then there is a little spot where the latch goes in here. And if there's dirt in here or something's wrong and the latch doesn't actually engage, the light goes to lamp amber, just like it does in a Tesla. And in most cases with a Tesla, it just goes to a reduced charging current, so lets you charge just at a reduced rate. And then just a little bit more extra credit of some things we do. This is the Jaguar E-Type conversion we did. There's the bus in the back. We've done some high voltage junction box development. So all your high voltage fuses, isolation monitoring equipment, and everything lives in there. And then the Jaguar powertrain that we've done. And yeah, that's what I've got. Does anyone have any questions?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Having done one of these back in '80, I know we spent about 10 grand. That's including batteries and all of it. So fast forward to 2025 for a Volkswagen, a simple Volkswagen conversion. What would it run approximately?
For the parts cost or for the whole job?
For the full job.
So the full job for something that we've done before and we already have the design for example, this bus, if we were to do it again, it'd be around $65,000 for the labor to build it, test it, tune it, and for all the parts.
You wouldn't be putting lead acid in it this time.
No,
Yeah. Right.
of course not.
Right.
That car of mine, I lived to those 1,000 pounds of batteries 3 times in 10 years. 3 battery sets in 10 years.
All right. Thank you.
I wanted to mention, well, actually 2 things. So does everyone here know what NACS is when he's talking about the NACS port?
Well, isn't it J3400 now?
Yeah, maybe they are. You're right. They might have come up with a different J standard. But basically, for your electric vehicle charging, for all intents and purposes, there's essentially 3 levels. Level 1 is your 120 volts. Level 2 is 208, 240 volts. And then level 3, actually, if you want to get technical, is other stuff. But essentially, the 3rd level is your DC fast charging, where there's an off-board high-power fast charger that's usually being fed like tens of thousands of kilowatts and 480 volt three-phase. And in the past, the automakers thankfully agreed on the level 1 and level 2 port, and so they all pretty much used the J1772, but they did not agree on the fast charging port. And so then it's kind of like Apple versus Android with the charge port connections. And Tesla made essentially the best port, and the other automakers for a long time resisted using it, and then most of them have finally agreed to use it, and that one is called the NACS, or North American Charging Standard. And so that should be gradually now, the other automakers are integrating that into the new vehicles, so they'll all finally use that one port, which will be really nice. But what if you have an older electric vehicle or an older conversion, or you want to do a conversion? Well, now, thanks to EV Works, locally you can buy one of these charge ports for your vehicle that will be the one future-proof good charge port that everyone's using. So that's pretty sweet.
Will Tesla allow you to plug in at their public stations?
So at the Tesla destination chargers, this would work at no problem. And that's level 2 charging. As far as whether they would let you or not, I've seen different signage at different destination places. Most of them, I think it's up to the owner. But sometimes I have seen Tesla vehicle only signs, not very often. I think usually it would be up to the property owner whether you could charge or not. And then for as far as the fast chargers, like Scott mentioned, EVgo does have fast chargers that have all I've seen, like at SeaTac Airport cell phone waiting lot, you got ones with CHAdeMO, the old Japanese level 3 standard, and the CCS and the NACS, all three like a Medusa fast charge station. So you should, once they get the DC side of it, then you'd probably be able to plug in there. And then as long as you set up a Tesla account and use an app, you might be able to, I think the goal in the future, because Tesla will want to make money off of charging, is if you set up an account with them and the vehicle is compatible enough with the superchargers, then they may allow that. Currently, it's only allowed for specific automakers that have made agreements with Tesla. Jay is back. We also have some news. Jay is selling some electric vehicle parts. As I understand, he's given me a run for my money on collecting old used electric vehicles. And apparently you got a 2013 Nissan Leaf.
Yes, one of my old customers from EV Works got broadsided while making an unwise left turn. So I was the old pickup that I showed a few weeks ago. And Dr. Rulin, please raise your hand. Dr. Rulin, paging Dr. Rulin, we have a functional taillight for your Nissan Leaf. And if you're looking for parts on a Leaf or an i-MiEV, I'm your guy. Meanwhile, I'm very sorry to miss all of Scott's presentation because after 17 years of watching me charge, that boy is still inept at using public chargers and completely incompetent and has me really pissed off right now.
Oh, sorry to hear.
The boy who's in Tacoma right now at a vandalized charging station that he didn't check in advance.
Yes. If you don't have the app PlugShare, highly recommend it. It's a great app for any electric vehicle owners if you're ever going to use public charging, because it gets crowdsourced information, so you can see whether people have checked in there recently and given reports like, oh no, somebody cut the cable or stuff like that. So it's really useful, the app PlugShare. As far as old Nissan Leafs go, the 2013, which Jay is selling parts from, I think is the Leaf to get if you're looking to get an old used Leaf, because the 2011s through 2013s were the only ones that you could tell the car to stop charging when it reached 80%, which is really good for extending your battery life. But the 2011s and 2012s only had up to a 3.3 kilowatt charger, which is really slow level 2 charging. And the 2013 you could get with a 6.6 kilowatt charger. But after 2013, you can't stop the car with just a simple setting in the car from charging above 80%. And so if you want to get an old Leaf, all Leafs are dirt cheap, and a lot of people don't distinguish between the value of whatever year is whatever year, but I think the 2013 is the one to get. And then like Jay's customer did, or like what you can have EV Works do for you, is the 2013s and newer as well will fit the newer Leaf battery packs from the second generation Leaf, which had up to like what, a 62 kilowatt hour pack. So you could potentially have a Leaf with like 240 mile range, like a Tesla ranged old Leaf. And I gotta tell you too, as somebody who still has an old 2013 Leaf and a 2011 Leaf, that those have been the most reliable cars I've ever had, other than the battery degrading. Otherwise, I've never done anything but plug it in and put windshield washer fluid and tires on. They're very reliable cars. Yes?
One note on that, if you do have a Leaf, try to keep it out of a lot of heat. The batteries do degrade like freaking crazy on those things. There's two reasons. They fix two different battery chemistries in the same pack. One does badly. Secondly, they are the only automaker to not thermally control the temperature from the battery. And as a result, there were people complaining that they drove a Leaf around LA, and after 2 years, they've lost 30% range. So just be aware of that.
Yeah, that is a good point, fair point. The Leaf's battery pack is unique in that it's air cooled, but by air cooled, not even like actually blowing air in, just the air that whooshes by underneath against the outside skin of the pack. So luckily in Washington State, not as much of a big deal unless you're driving hard and fast charging all the time. But in hotter areas for sure, Eastern Washington could be more of an issue as well. Yeah, that is a valid point. For doing conversions, getting the Leaf modules can make for a very easy conversion, since they are one that are not liquid cooled. Then it's something you don't have to do, and you can kind of stack them together like Legos, because I call them, they look like large sardine cans, and they got 4 holes in the corner, so you can get all thread and just keep ganging them up and make your battery packs out of the old Leaf modules, which Charlie has done in the Z3 conversion that's outside if you want to see one. Do we have any other, you want to just mention a quick word, Ryan? So Ryan and Micah went with a bunch of Cybertrucks, and tell us where you went and give us a little rundown if there were any exciting things that happened.
Yeah, so there's a Facebook Pacific Northwest Cybertruck Owners Club, and there's another one on Twitter/X. And so they kind of organize some more experienced off-road people, organized little events. A couple months ago, we went to Tillamook Forest in Oregon for a day of off-roading, and then last weekend we went started at Enumclaw with the intent to go over toward Rainier and catch up with 410. We didn't quite make it, but we had a lot of fun along the way. Took a couple detours. We came across a relatively technical trail that only one of the 7 trucks was anxious to try out. The service was like, no, we're good. We're sticking to the forestry service roads. So I jumped in the back of that truck and rode up with my camera and have a video of it. At one point, it was a 45-degree climb, so I'm gonna wait a couple years before I feel like I'm brave enough to try that out. And then the route that we had planned had kind of a little cut off, but kind of like a more technical path that cut between Forest Service roads that turned out to be a little rockier and more technical than we had anticipated, and the lead vehicle punctured the sidewall. So we spent an hour or so patching it and then backing out, and then we decided we probably aren't going to make it to 410. We had already burned 30 to 35%, getting a third of the way on the trails, which only got us to 410, which is still another hour away from Auburn Super Mall, which is the first nearest supercharger. So we kind of all, what?
It's all downhill.
It was. So we kind of all got all spooked, and the repair tire isn't going had to abort and go back, but he didn't have a tire, so we needed to borrow one from somebody else.
Yeah, didn't you have an extra tire?
I do. Well, three of us had extra tires, so he ended up getting a tire. So we ended up aborting and just backtracking the way that we came in. And about halfway there, we had aired up his still leaking puncture tire twice and decided we would just swap it out on the trail. So I got to use my pneumatic jack. It was an air compressed 3-bag jack for the first time. So I learned some flaws on it. I need to fix some tubing that was kinked. Why is this not? It seems very weak and slow. Kink this hose, it would work better. So got his tire swapped and then rallied back into town in the even thaw. We only spent 10% getting back. So yes, downhill makes a difference. And then had a dinner at a local place. And they said there was a buzz in town today. There was a bunch of Cybertrucks up on the thing. So I guess we made the gossip channels in Enumclaw. So I'm intending on trying to find some alternate routes for that path and doing some other attempts that are more straightforward than the route that we happen to have planned that day. Maybe going out weekends and see if we can get from Enumclaw to Rainier down into Auburn in a single shot. And how much margin we have on that, but so that was a lot of fun.
Cool. And when you were on the trail, did you encounter any other gas 4x4 guys? Were there any interesting exchanges or reactions to all the Cybertrucks?
Yeah, there were reactions. Not explicitly bad.
Good.
Just
People
was,
excited or interested to see them way out there?
Here, right? Yeah. So yeah, a bunch of dirt bikes, side by sides, 4x4s, some Subarus, and a Toyota Corolla or two out on forest service roads. I think there was like a cyclist event, so we all felt horrible dusting the cyclists going, the first 5-10 miles up, into the mountain before they were done with their route or whatever they were doing that day.
And just Cybertrucks, no Rivians or Lightnings or Silverado
I
EVs?
invited Lightning, but he was a no-show.
I had other plans.
And you have been fine, mostly Forest Service roads, a little bit of washboards and a little bit of potholes and stuff, but like nothing you can take with a Hyundai, so maybe not.
Mike, it didn't take you inside, did you? No, all right. Well,
But
thanks a lot.
Awesome to have some reviews out there. Yeah, in the past, off-roading excursions we've done with Lightnings and Rivians, and maybe we'll see some Silverados up there.
Yeah, the Silverado EV, in my opinion, honestly, is pretty. If you were in the market for a pickup truck, especially with the used values being what they are, they're down in the $50,000 range, and you get potentially a 470 to 490 mile per charge electric vehicle. It is the highest range vehicle other than a Lucid, and it's a giant truck, so it's pretty impressive.
At the SVT, it's tricked out with a midgate, crazy bed features.
True, yes. Another thing about the electric trucks that I haven't liked, being somebody who's really tall, is none of them have a longer than 6-foot bed. The Cybertruck's bed is actually the longest native bed at just 6 feet, but that's too short for yours truly to sleep in. The Silverado EV is a little bit shorter than 6 feet, actually. Yeah.
Silverado's coming out with an off-road version next year.
I saw that. That looks
18-inch
pretty exciting.
wheels and instead of airbags, they have coilovers.
Cool. But the one thing the Silverado and the Denali EV, I believe, if you get the higher trim levels, do have that is cool is the back of the cab actually opens into the cab compartment. And so then you can put a 4x8 sheet of plywood or something in. You can, as I hear, with the tailgate down and the little end cap, you can actually get 10-foot stuff in there. So that's kind of cool.
It's a 60/40 too, so you could actually have
a kayak
and
still someone sitting there.
Seat.
Yeah, pretty cool.
Yeah.
In the back, Miss, you had a question? Ah, that's right. You've got the VW Buzz out there. Well, and that's a good segue then. I'll mention the last thing. If you're not on the Seattle Electric Vehicle Association email list. You should join, and you can go to seattleeva.org to join that, because we have not settled for sure on where our next month's meeting will be, and so we'll be sure to put that information out coming soon on where we will have our next month's meeting, and let you know. So be sure to stay focused on that. Yes?
Yeah, while we're still here, I would like to, if it's still possible to put it up on the screen, is Charlie's email address for signing up for the car show. I heard you read it off, and I think
Yes.
I've got my copy at home, but for the rest of everybody.
Unfortunately, I just
spell it out
unplugged
really
and turned
small.
off it, but I will spell it out for everybody, because yes,
Okay.
we want to get more cars at the Greenwood Car
Right.
Show.
Whiteboard right
It is C4, yeah, there we go. Do we have a whiteboard marker?
To your left at the top left corner.
Ah, yes. It is C4, like the plastic explosive, or like Charlie, Chris, Claire, and Corey,
Oh, that's
the
right.
4 members of the Sai family.
Okay.
C4, T is in Tom, S is in Sam, A is in Apple, I is in Isaac, at yahoo.com. And send him your name, your address, your contact info. This is not all going to the Greenwood folks either, rest assured. It'll just
Yeah.
be,
For Greenwood, I really just need the year of the car, the make and model.
Yeah.
And,
Year, make, model.
and I entered you as part of the SEVA car club. The rest of the information is just in case I need to get in touch with you, you know, because I'll be sending people information on where to go, you know, how we're gonna meet up to park, what part of the Greenwood strip we're all gonna park at as a group. And so, you know, I might need your cell phone to reach you for last minute emergencies or whatever, and your email address to send you that information.
all right. And with that, so we can help Mike get out of here early, let's adjourn to the parking lot. And we do have the awesome 23 window old school Volkswagen conversion, as well as the brand new VW Buzz out there. If you haven't seen either of those, check them out. Thank you, everyone.